Hi, I'm Peggy Fair, and welcome to the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. We're going to talk about filters today. What are filters? ND filters, Polarizer filters, light pollution filters. We're going to talk about that with Joe Fitzpatrick, and as most of you know, he's our resident technical person. He knows pretty much everything, or he researches if he doesn't. Anyway, the Understand Photography Show is a podcast. So we put pictures in the show notes. So if you're watching us on YouTube, check out the show notes on understandphotography.com. And while you're there, right when you get to the website, you'll see it says click here for freebies. Click on one of our freebies. We've got all kinds of good stuff. Essential tips for travel photographers, which camera to buy. One of the most popular ones is how to get tack sharp images every time. What you need to learn to become a solid photographer. Anyway, there's a list of different things that you can select one or all of them. And in exchange, we ask for your email address. We send out a newsletter once a month, and it's got photo tips and, of course, what's happening at Understand Photography. Joe Fitzpatrick is a landscape photographer, nature photographer, bird photographer. Yeah, actually, he's an all-around good photographer, even though he specializes in nature photography at this point in his career. He is our lead instructor at Understand Photography. He leads many of our workshops, especially in the Everglades, and is our technical specialist. So welcome, Joe. Welcome back.
Thank you, Peggy. Good to be here.
So what are filters? Tell us about filters in general.
Okay, well, a filter is just something you're putting in front of the lens that's going to reduce or modify the light somehow.
Okay.
In its most basic, that's what it would be.
Okay, so what kinds of filters are there?
Well, there's two basic types we have. There's square ones, square or rectangular, that slide into a holder that you put on the front of the lens. And then there's circular ones that screw onto the front of the lens. Okay,
so if you get the kind with a holder, that's a bigger investment, right, in the beginning?
Yeah.
So it screws onto your lens, the holder.
The holder screws onto the lens.
And then it has a little, what'd you call it, a bracket or something to slip the...
Yeah, there's a piece that screws onto the lens, and then there's usually another attachment that goes onto that will hold, it's like a rack. It'll maybe hold 2 or 3 rectangularly shaped filters that slide into slots in it.
Okay. And you can also stack filters, correct?
Yeah, if you're using the screw-on type, you can put one on top of another.
They
you can
screw onto each
on,
other?
and then you can screw the next one on. Most of them have threads, have male threads on the one side and female on the other, so you can do that. There are, however, some that are ultra-thin filters, and the way they get so thin is they don't have any threads on the outside, so you can't screw anything onto them.
Oh, so that's something to look out for.
Yeah,
when
that's
you're
something
looking.
to look out for.
Okay.
There are not a lot of them, but it's something to be aware of.
So the square kind, they come in kits, or do you buy them separately, the bracket, and then are you stuck with the same brand if you buy that all the time?
Well, there's first off, you can get a kit which would have the holder, the ring you need to attach it to the size lens you have, or maybe several rings to attach to different size lenses, and it'll have the holder, and maybe it'll have some basic filters in it as well. You could also buy the things a la carte, piecemeal. You could buy each piece as it is. For the most part, the actual filters, the rectangular filter, they're standard sizes. So if you could use anybody's filter of that size in your holder.
Okay.
And often people do.
Is there a benefit to that over the kind that screw onto your lens?
Well, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. The ones that are slide-in, okay, the advantage there is you can quickly change them. You're just slipping it in, and
okay.
It's easy to stack multiple filters because you just boom, 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 slide them in. If you're using a graduated filter, you can slide it up or down to put the graduation line wherever you want it. With a circular filter, you really can't do that, okay? So if you're talking graduated filters, grads, really the only practical thing is a slide in, okay? Now, as I say, you can stack multiple ones, and usually the filter, you want to get a holder and size filters that's big enough so you're not going to get vignetting with your ultra-wide lenses. So the bigger it is, the better really if you're talking ultra-wide lenses.
And how do you know, is
Well,
it
they
a
come
measurement or?
Yeah, they come in different sizes for them. You know, there's like a 4-inch and a this, that, and the other. So
Okay.
you get the sizes, and usually the bigger ones they say are pro. All I mean is they're fitting. You got to be careful if you get one that's too small, you're not going to be able to use it on your wide-angle lenses.
I
And of
see.
course, diameters of lenses keep getting larger and larger, as you know. If you remember back, the lenses were fairly small. The first set I had like that was a Cokin set, C-O-K-I-N, and I had a whole set, a whole mess of theirs. But they were for the old style lenses we had, where about as big of a filter size you got was maybe 50 or 55 or something like that. And when the newer lenses came out, it wasn't any use anymore because the whole set was too small for the lenses I was using.
Okay. All right.
But if you're getting a set today, you want a larger set, a bigger size set. You know,
You're talking about
physicals.
the square thing.
The square thing
Yeah.
or rectangular, you want one that's large enough there in the width so you can use that with any of your lenses.
Several different
Wide lenses, yeah.
And the circular kind, you have to get the exact one every time? Or wait, no.
No, what you can do there
So let's
is-
say I have a 77 millimeter lens and also a 67, two different lenses.
Okay.
So
you
what am I
do
going to
is
do?
You buy your filters to fit your largest lens,
Okay.
okay?
So let's say that's 77.
That's 77. So you buy 77, or if you think you're going to buy a larger lens down the road, get it to fit whatever your biggest one is.
Okay.
Okay. And then you get what are called step-up rings.
Okay.
There's two kinds of rings, step up and step down.
All right.
Step up is a ring that you adapt a larger filter onto a smaller lens.
And I would think that would be called step down.
Well, you're looking at it from the photographer in back of the camera, and it's stepping up.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you step up to a larger filter, you're not going to get any vignetting because your filter is much bigger than your lens. The other kind of ring where if you have a filter that's too small and you're trying to put it on a bigger lens. So you're going to step down to the filter, and since the filter is smaller, you may get vignetting.
Oh, that's good advice.
So one way to think of stepping up or stepping down, because a lot of people, is it a step up ring or a step down? People
Right.
don't remember. I remember it because a step up ring is the better ring, and when you step up, you're going to something better. So that's my little memory trick as to how I remember which one it is, because a lot of people, me included for a long time, couldn't remember which was. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know what to order, you know. So
And-
you use that.
And by the way, to our audience, Joe wrote an article about step-up rings quite a long time
Yeah,
ago. I don't
quite a
remember
while.
how long it
Yeah,
is, but
yeah.
Heather will find the link and put it in the show notes. So, all right. So the square, if you're going to be a serious filter user, probably the square is a better investment.
Well, we were talking about square and their advantages, and we talked about some of the advantages. You can quickly slide them in and what have you. But there's disadvantages too.
Okay.
Number one, it's a big apparatus. You have this big thing that you're putting on the front that has the slides, and then you have all these fairly large rectangles of plastic or glass, and we can talk about that too a little bit. So you have all these big rectangles, and you have this box that fits on the front and everything else. Typically, you don't have a hood. And the hoods they sell for these things are even clunkier and don't work very well. So when you get all done with this, all these filters can get reflections on them from the sun and what have you. I always have a lens hood on my camera to eliminate flare and reduce contrast. With these sets, you don't have that ability, other than standing there maybe and with something to shade the lens or something like that, which is fine if you're a landscape photographer. I use my hat sometimes for that kind of stuff, but that's a problem there. The other problem is night photography. Now, they have a real advantage for shooting night photography or any kind of photography they have an advantage for night photography. You know, it's nice, you can see it, and then if you needed a filter or something, you can slide it in. However, since the filter doesn't fit tight against the lens, light can leak in back of the filters. Now, they have things you can put on there to prevent that, but then again, you got something else you're attaching.
So you have a lot of stuff to carry.
Yeah, okay.
That's the biggest drawback.
You have to be aware of, if you're using a neutral density filter or something like that where you're trying to reduce the light, you're going to get light in the back. If you're shooting at night, you may get light in the back you don't want. Okay? The advantage, if you're going to use neutral density filters with them, or if you're talking heavy like 10 stop or something, where you have to focus before you put the filter on because you can't see anything afterwards. With them, you focus and you just slide it in. So there's no chance you're going to bump the focus ring. Where if you have to screw on a filter, you're going to have to hold everything carefully so when you screw the filter on, you don't upset your focus point. Okay.
Okay.
So there are advantages and disadvantages. Now, with the circular are great when you're using a neutral density filter because you can quickly put them off and on, although you have to watch, as I said, if you get like a 10 stop where you can't see the focus or whatever, you have to be careful putting it on. Circular polarizer, they're ideal because you can just spin it right on there. They have circular polarizers for the rectangular ones. It's a square thing that sits in a slot and then you can turn it, but circular polarizer, when I'm doing landscape photography, I have it on the camera almost all day. On the lens. So if I was using a filter system with the rectangular filters, I'd have to have all this big clunky stuff on the front, or I'd have to be constantly taking it off. Where for the CPL, I can use that even if I'm just carrying the camera around. It's on there. It's just nothing.
And when you say CPL, you
circular polarizer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's much easier to have.
It's much simpler. It's simpler if you're talking one filter or two filters and you want to leave that filter on while you're walking around. It's simpler with a, they both have their purposes.
All right, so let's talk about, so there's a circular polarizing lens.
Yes.
That's a filter, and you call it CPL. You're a slang kind of guy, but we're going to try not to use too much slang, and so I guess it's hard to learn that way.
Well, if you go to the store, probably they'll be more familiar if you ask for a CPL than they would if you ask for a circular polarizer.
And neutral density.
Yeah.
And then we talked a little bit about light or pollution. What is it? Light pollution
We were
filter?
talking about that before the show. There's light pollution filters.
Is there anything else?
Well, there's special effects filters.
Like the starburst.
Like the starburst.
I forgot about that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
Oh yeah, I used to use that a lot back in the weddings before you could do a lot of this in post. The starburst of that.
But those aren't very.
There's soft focus ones, or ones that'll give a soft focus around a central.
But those aren't
thing.
really used anymore, are they?
Well, some of them are. Some people.
I mean,
use
you can
that
do all
effect.
that in Photoshop so
You
easily.
do a lot of that in Photoshop, but some of the stuff people like to play around with it and do it. You know, there's people that like to do as much as they can in camera as opposed to doing it in post. And so they're around still. Are they as many as there used to be? Certainly not.
All right, so let's go through each one. Circular polarizer.
Okay.
CPL. What does it do?
Okay, the circular polarizer, its primary purpose is to reduce glare, reflections off surfaces, specular highlights, any kind of glare off a metal or shiny leaf. Sometimes, certain times of the day when you look at leaves, you see all this white specular highlights all over them. You put the circular polarizer there and you have to turn it. When you screw it on, there's another revolving piece on the outside. And as you look through the viewfinder and you turn it, you can see the effect take place and then go away again. Okay, as you turn it through 180 degrees or so, you'll see it happen and then stop. So you turn it to get the amount of reflectivity out of there that you want. Because in some circumstances, maybe you're shooting a brook, and maybe you want to see into the brook, but you want to see a little bit of surface specular highlights too, so you can control exactly how much of that you want as you turn it. So you're using it to get rid of those kind of reflections. Also, as it reduces the reflections, it's increasing the saturation.
Okay.
Okay, so they all your colors become more saturated when you have the polarizer on there.
Ah, so that's a nice little
It's
bonus.
it's great for landscape photography because it gets rid of the specular highlights and it saturates the colors as well. So it gives you a really nice effect. Now, depending on where your lens is pointing in relation to where the sun is, it can be more or less effective.
Okay.
It's most effective when your lens is 90 degrees to the sun. So in other words, if you take your finger and you point your finger where your lens is pointing, if the sun, you're holding your fingers out, if where the sun is up, that's where it's going to be most effective. In other words, off to the side. As the sun comes around, where it's in back of you or directly in front of you, it becomes less effective.
So when the sun is off to the side, is that what you just said?
Sun's off to the side or directly overhead, it's most effective.
Okay. So
Okay.
behind you
Behind you,
is pretty unnecessary.
Yeah. If
Okay.
if the sun's directly behind you, it's not going to help, and if it's directly in front of you, it's not going to help.
And the biggest thing about the polarizing lenses is you have to remember to turn every time you, like if you're going to do it horizontal to
Yeah.
a vertical shot, you need to remember
you need
to
turn it. Yeah.
turn
Okay.
your filter
Exactly.
again. And you can see the difference, especially if you put it up in the, like at the clouds or something, you can see a big difference.
Yeah,
and
you
that's
can see it. It really puts a
as
punch.
you're turning it, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about circular
Well,
CPLs?
you have to watch with skies especially. Now it's saturating and darkening the sky, but as we talked about, as you move around, it's changing how effective it is, right? So if you have a really wide lens, it's got a wide angle of view, it's only going to be effective for part of it. So you won't get a smooth blue sky. It'll go light and dark and light again.
Ooh.
And it's difficult.
And you're talking sideways, not up
side,
and down.
not up and down. I'm talking side to side. Yeah, if it was
Okay.
up and down, it wouldn't be too bad, but side to side.
Yeah, that
and
sounds
that's
terrible.
difficult to get out in post-processing.
So
you know.
if you have a super wide lens, like how wide?
Well, typically, I don't use it on anything wider than 24 millimeter on a full frame camera.
Okay.
Okay, which is
18.
18 or so on that. That's kind of, to me, the absolute outside.
Okay.
35 would be better. 24, you can get away with it most of the time.
Okay.
But you have to be aware of that it is going to give you that strange effect in the sky.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
that's
really
a-
good to know.
Now, the other drawback is it's costing you 2 stops of light.
Okay.
Okay, which is why, as I say, I use it all the time for landscapes. I don't even have one for my big telephoto because when I'm using that, I'm using it to shoot wildlife. Typically, wildlife is out first thing in the morning or last thing at night. I need a high shutter speed, so I'm challenged on the ISO I want to use and the apertures I use, so I can't afford to lose 2 stops of light. So I can't really, it'd be great if I could and bring out the colors and stuff,
Okay.
but I just can't afford to lose that kind of light.
So what range of lenses do you use a CPL on? 24 on a full frame. You're saying 24
I use it on
to what?
anything from 24 to 200 or so.
Okay.
Because anything more than that, I'm shooting the wildlife, and I'm usually, my longer lenses aren't super expensive, so they're slow. They're 5.6 or 6.3 when they're open, so they're not gathering a lot of light. You know, my
Okay.
200 is a 2.8, so f-stop, so I can afford to lose a stop or two of light there, you know.
Okay, all right. Anything else about circular CPLs? Circular polarizers?
Well, get a good one.
Get a good one. Well, we're going to talk
you
about
know,
quality
yeah,
after we
I
talk
mean-
about the different types.
I mean, that's about all that you want. A circular one. There's linear polarizers too, but they affect your autofocus and metering and stuff on a lot of cameras. So they were used years ago, and then everybody has gone to CPLs. Now I understand on some newer cameras you might not be able to need that. You could go back to the old style, but no, I don't know which ones that'd be, and they don't tell you. So you're better off just sticking with the circular polarizer.
Okay, and then neutral density filters are the next most popular
They're
filter.
the next most popular. That's the next thing in my kit. And I have them in various strengths. I usually have a 3 and a 5 and a 7, something like that.
Okay, what is it? Let's start with that.
Okay, well, a neutral density filter is a pair of sunglasses to put in front of your lens. It's something that's reducing the light coming in.
Okay.
Okay, why do you want to reduce the light coming in? Especially, I was just talking about I can't afford to reduce light, right? Well, now we're talking about reducing light. So now we're talking about somewhere where you have too much light for what you want to do. Typically, it's for if you want a slow exposure, you want a slow shutter speed, so you can get a long exposure for whatever reason, to get silky water, to blur motion a lot or whatever. And you need to be able to have a slow shutter speed, maybe a 1/15 of a second or maybe several seconds or more seconds. Well, under bright conditions, you go down to f/22 and ISO 100, you can only get so low under those conditions. So you can't get there without reducing the light with something. So they have these filters. And I talked about ND3, ND5. That's the number of stops they reduce the light.
Okay, so if I have an ND, a neutral density is ND.
Yeah.
And it's a 3. That means if I screw that onto the front of my lens, it's going to reduce the light by 3 stops.
Yeah.
All right, so if I want to buy a neutral density filter, you said like one will reduce it by 3 stops.
Yeah.
Is that like listed on the package, or how do you know?
Why would they do that? That would make it easy for you. Actually, they use 2 different numbering systems to make it even more confusing.
Okay.
The one numbering system usually starts with the letters ND, and that'll be like ND2 or ND4 or ND8 or ND16. In that numbering system there, an ND2 is 1 stop, an ND4 is 2 stops, and ND8 is 3 stops. In other words, the number is doubling each time.
Okay.
So you would just count backwards and see what you had, okay? The other method of measuring them and listing on them is it'll be a number, it'll be 0.03, 0.09, like that.
Okay.
0.03, or is it 0.3? Whatever, but it's a decimal point in the number. That's 3 is 1 stop, 6 is 2 stops, 9 is 3 stops, and so forth.
And do they put that? How do you know that? I mean,
Well, they put that on the box what it is, but they don't tell you this is 3 stops typically.
Wow.
So,
and different manufacturers do it,
some of them
number
do
it differently.
Some of them do the ND number, and some do the 0.0
So you
number.
just have to have you have to know. You just have to know.
You have to know. Now you can Google and get a chart to tell you which is which, you know. And basically, I have to think about it when you ask me a question like that, because when I buy them, I take the plastic case it comes in and I take a magic marker and I put 3 stops on it or 5 stops on it, so I don't have to sit there and do the math trying to remember, is it 16 3 stops or is it this or that?
Yeah, that's complicated.
So I just write on it, and I don't know why they don't just do that too, but they
Maybe
don't.
what we can do in the show notes is put a chart in there.
Yeah, link to a chart of some kind. But that's what you do. But typically, a 3 stop and a 5 stop and maybe a 10 stop are typically the kind you buy. A 10 stop, you can't see anything when you have it on there, unless it's a really bright day.
Okay.
I mean, it's dark. It's not dark enough to do an eclipse with, a solar eclipse. It's not that dark, but it's pretty black. 3 stops are useful. I have a 3 and a 5 and another one, and you can combine them together because you can stack them.
So if you had a 3 and a 5, it would be 8 stops.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Okay.
just simple. There's nothing fancy. It's just
And
adding
what
the
would you
stops.
use a 10 stop for?
If you want a really long exposure on a sunny day. Okay, if you want to get that babbling brook midday and get all funky looking cotton candy for water, you're going to need 10 stops. You may even need more than that. Typically when I'm using them around the golden hours around sunset and sunrise. So usually for me, a 3 or a 5 or a combination of the 2 works plenty for me with what I do. But it depends on the look you're looking for and how long of a shutter speed you want.
We had a guest, Kevin Holliday, and maybe Heather could look up the show number, but he has a 15-stop filter that he uses because he likes the clouds. He does 10-minute exposures, and the clouds just turn to mush because the cloud, when the clouds are moving, it looks so cool.
Yeah, it depends on the look you want, just how many of these you want on there. But
now, can you stack an ND filter and a polarizer, or would you?
I often do.
Okay.
As I said, the circular polarizer will knock another 2 stops on. So maybe if I want to get rid of some specular highlights, I'll use that combined with a 3, and I'll have 5 stops more or less of, when I say 2 stops on the circular polarizer, that's an approximation. Okay, and it depends actually on how it's turned and whatever, but I'll put the ND, or the 3-stop and neutral density on there. I'll put a circular polarizer on there. I'll get rid of my specular highlights, and I've picked up more stops to slow the shutter speed down.
Okay.
So I use them together a lot.
Okay. All right. And anything else about ND filters?
Well, yeah. We've talked about ones that are, you're buying a 3-stop or a 5-stop or a 10-stop or whatever. They also have variable neutral density filters. Okay, where you turn a ring on it like you do on a circular polarizer, and it varies the number of stops you have. Okay? I find they are, regardless of the price you pay, lousy.
I bought one. I have to admit, that was my first filter.
Okay.
I bought one, and it put like an X in the middle of all the pictures. It was weird.
What happens is you crank it to the end where it's the most stops. You start getting different things in there. You get lines in there. You get terrible color shifts and everything else. A variable one, if it says it's good for 10 stops, that means the first 5 stops will be tolerable, and anything between 5 and 10 you're not going to like. And that's whether you're talking a cheap one or you're talking a $200 one. The $200 ones are a little bit better, but not that much.
Stay away.
I mean, basically what they are is they're 2 circular polarizers glued onto each other, turning in different directions to do it. Okay, if you've ever looked to see if a pair of glasses is polarized, and you just take 2 pair and you turn them at 90 degrees and it's black, you can't see through them. Have you ever done that?
No.
No? Okay, well, that's how you can tell if you're looking at sunglasses in a store, you want to know whether they're polarized, pick up one pair, pick up the other, put them at 90 degrees, and it'll be black.
Okay.
And as you turn, it'll come back. Well, that's what's happening. It's 2 circular polarizers, and they're just turning one against the other.
Okay, so we just don't buy that. Don't buy a variable.
No, I wouldn't.
And then the
I
other
don't
thing
recommend
that
it.
we talked about was the graduated ND filters, and those are where half of the filter is dark, like less than 2 stops, and then the bottom is
clear.
clear.
It's clear.
And that's for sunsets.
That's for sunset. Well, actually,
or any time.
It's for any time where you have a big brightness difference between, say, the sky and the ground. So if you're trying to do a landscape and it's fairly dark, the mountains and all, but the sky is fairly bright, you use the neutral density, graduate it, and you have this so it can darken the sky, so you can expose longer and get more detail in the dark parts. Okay, the problem is you have a line there. Now you can buy them where they're a fairly hard edge between the top and the bottom, the dark part and the light part, or you can buy them where they're more of a softness, a more graduated effect in there. You can also get them tinted for different things.
Okay.
Okay, you don't have to just be neutral density. They can be warming or cooling and things like that too, so you can get a little different effect in camera at the same time.
Right, but isn't it better to do that in Photoshop? Just
Well,
because what if you change your mind?
Well, I
don't like it this warm.
I like doing that kind of stuff in post-processing.
Yeah.
But to do it in post-processing takes time and it takes skill. If you're doing it in the camera, you can see exactly what's happening as you take the picture. Because with today's cameras, you have an LCD on the back, and you can see either while you're doing it, if it's a mirrorless camera, or immediately afterwards or whatever, you can see the result.
Yeah.
So you can change it, and then you're not doing anything in post.
And
so it depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, and I was talking about the colors, not the...
Yeah.
I can see the need for the graduated filter.
Right.
But, a lot of people now, just like Stefano Caporelli, who I do this Tuscany trip with, he just brackets. So he does a dark exposure and a light exposure and just blends them because it's so easy to blend now.
That's what I do too. I
Yeah.
don't even own a graduated ND filter at this point.
Okay.
I mean, I used to use them all the time, but I find it simpler to do it in post.
All right, what else about ND? Anything?
Well, you want to get good quality ones because they'll have a color shift if you don't.
Okay, but we're going to talk about quality in a minute.
Okay.
So does that fit here or does that fit there?
No, not really.
Okay.
We're just talking about the cheap ones will have a color shift.
Okay.
So you'll get a weird purplish color or bluish shift of the colors when you put it on. The better ones won't have any or very little color shift.
Okay. And what about the light pollution filters?
Okay,
I just learned about them yesterday.
There's something relatively new, and mostly they're being sold by small brands, you know, where they're more boutique brands.
Like Stingray, I know, sells one.
Well, Stingray's a pretty good sized company, though. They're not I wouldn't call them a boutique brand. They're one of the major names in the filters. Okay, well then they are getting into the mainstream. I mean, Stingray's a major name. They're well respected. What they do is they're for light pollution at night, and the light pollution at night is coming from street lights, and they're a specific part of the spectrum, you know, the color range. So what they do is they're targeted to just eliminate or block out the light from a specific color range, color temperature. Okay. So they tune them to whatever the street lights would be, and they're blocking that out. They have so they're very narrow. They're blocking a very narrow range of light, and you buy them for that. Now, of course, if you're doing star work, you have to make sure that the range they're blocking isn't the star range, or you.
Right, because that's the main people who would use those.
Yeah,
are night
would
photographers.
use them, night photographers. So they have
like night sky photographers or any kind of night photographer.
Well, night sky mostly, because you're just trying to get rid of, you're doing night sky, or you're doing cityscapes at night, where you're doing a whole big cityscape and you don't want any pollution in there. These will get rid of specific bands of light.
Okay, that's kind of cool.
It's nice. They work pretty well, but they're not going to eliminate everything, because there's all different bands of pollution, and they can only work on target certain ones.
Okay, and that was it? There were any other kind of filters?
Well, we talked some stuff about specialty ones like star filters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to talk about that.
The other thing would be a protection filter, the one that the camera stores love to sell you.
Okay.
A skylight filter, a 1A. Okay.
What's your opinion on that?
Waste of money. I have them, but I rarely use them. Now, in the film days, it was a useful filter because it eliminated UV light, okay, which...
Yeah, because that's what they call them, I think, a UV filter.
Yeah, it's a UV filter. Yeah. They have UV, and then they have ones that are actually just clear piece of glass.
Okay.
Most of the ones you buy are UV. And they're not doing anything to get rid of the UV rays, because the sensors aren't sensitive to UV, so it don't need it on there for that. So you're using it to protect the lens. To me, I protect my lens with either a lens cap on there when I'm not using it, or a hood if I am. And the hood is large enough, it's protecting the lens, you can't get fingers in there, you can't bang it or anything else. And I find that more than adequate protection. The UV filter, to me, is another piece of glass you're putting in front of the camera. And regardless of how good it is, it's another piece of glass, it's another chance to get reflections and kill some of your contrast and what have you, so I'd rather not use it. This is a big debate whether to put them on or not.
Yeah, I know some people
When I use film, I had them on every camera. When I switched to digital, and I started getting lenses for digital, and a lot of them were bigger, so I needed to buy new ones, or I'd take the one off the old and I'll put it on the new one. I started looking at all these filters, and not one of them in 30 or 40 years had a scratch on it. So I'm thinking,
What do you need it for?
What do I need it for? So I stopped using them because I have a hood on there. Now those hoods have saved me numbers of times where things have gotten banged or this or that. If the hood wasn't on there, I would have certainly needed something, or it would have been the lens that was damaged.
My hoods are beat up because I, you know, not so much anymore, but when I did weddings, I had 2 cameras hanging off my shoulders and I was banging into everything. So I was happy for the hoods.
Yeah, I mean, they're really useful.
So. All right, any other filters that we're missing that would be common?
I don't know, not that are common. I mean,
Right.
most common is your CPL and your neutral density. That's
All right, so let's talk about quality. Now you touched on it for
Okay.
ND filters. Why don't we start with ND filters?
okay.
Because you touched on it.
The one thing you want to watch in any filter is it doesn't give a color cast that it isn't supposed to.
And how do you know that? From the
Your
reviews?
reviews, trying it out and looking at it, you know. If you're going to test it yourself, like in the store or something, make sure you're not on auto white balance, because that's going to try and correct for whatever the problem is.
Okay.
So if you really want to see what the problem is, pick it doesn't matter what one you pick, but pick a specific white balance so it's locked in, and then try different ones, and you'll see some may give you more or less of a color cast. So that's the one thing you got to watch, and that's most prevalent with circular polarizers and neutral densities. You see that, you get that. But there's other things too. We talked about reflections and reducing contrast and things like that. That's why they put coatings on them. A coating is just something they put on there that helps reduce any reflectivity. Coatings is what they are.
Okay.
And the better filters are multi-coated, or they have different coatings on there to do different things. So they have real quality, and they're doing that on both sides of the filter.
Okay.
If it's good quality, because you can get reflections back from the lens too. Okay. So just like your lenses are multi-coated, you want a filter that's multi-coated too.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. This costs money, so a good filter is not going to be $20 to buy it unless it's a really small size. You know, typically you're looking $50 to $150 for a decent.
For just one filter.
For just one filter. They can be much more than that too. So you want to look for multi-coated. Now we're talking in the screw-on filters, the circular filters.
Okay.
There are 2 things you want to look for there. When you get into your rectangular filters for the filter systems, we have one more thing, and that's whether they're glass or plastic, or actually say resin. Okay.
Resin, okay.
Resin. The less expensive ones can be resin, and resin's also lighter and less likely to break. So resin has advantages. Resin has disadvantages too. Typically it's maybe not quite as optically clear, you know, but you have the advantages of lightness and things. The resin ones are typically cheaper than the old glass ones. They both can be coated and multi-coated and what have you.
Okay.
So they're, again, your different qualities. You know, you may see 2 filters and they look the same, but one might be single coated or no coating at all. It's a real cheap thing from China that they're selling on eBay. You say, oh, what a deal, I can get a whole set for $20, you know, but you're going to be disappointed. And then you look at the other guy and says, why is his filter $200 for a 3x4 piece of glass?
Yeah.
Well, it's perfect glass, you know, is what it is. So you have that quality there. And the only way you can do that is read reviews. If you're fortunate enough to have a camera store where you can go look at it and put it on your camera and shoot with it and see what it does for you.
Okay, awesome.
But
anything else about quality that we need to look out for?
No, that would be about it. There's big differences in the holders for the rectangular style. Some of them are easier to slide the filters in. Some of them are better at holding the filter without it accidentally dropping out. Some of them have a nice way that they put a circular polarizer in better than other ways. So you want to look at that and see what it is that you like. You know?
Okay.
So you'd want to look at them.
Okay, okay. Wow, there's a lot. Now, do you have brands that you recommend, or? I
like what used to be an off-brand that was really a good deal, and that's Marumi, M-A-R-U-M-I.
Sounds Japanese.
It is. And And you used to be able to get their filters for half of what a BNW or B plus W, I don't know which is the right way to say that. That's the big brand in the field of circular ones, is B and the plus sign and W.
Okay.
And some people say BNW and some people say B plus W, and I don't know which is the right way. But you used to be able to buy these Marumis for about half the price of a B&W filter, and their quality was just as good. They tested just as well.
Oh, okay.
Well, Marumi caught up and wised up that they weren't charging enough. So now their price is up there where I guess it should have been all along. I like their filters. They're good quality. I have their neutral density filters. I have their circular polarizer. They're good for that. For the filter systems, the slide in, there's a lot of good brands out there. The more common brands, Stingray, Lee, some of the more expensive ones, there's a whole laundry list of them. Some can get really pricey, some are more mainstream. Yeah, and Hoya, Hoya's one of these outfits that has 4 or 5 different brand levels.
Oh.
And their inexpensive ones are cheap.
But you don't
They're
want,
cheap.
but you don't want them.
No. There are better ones, they're multi-coated ones, and that are very good filters. So they have a range. So when you're
make
looking
sure
at,
that you do.
make sure, and Tiffin does the same thing. You want to make sure that you're getting their better filters and not their bargain brand stuff.
And all right, so what's a price range for a circular CPL, circular polarizer?
All right, well, it's going to vary with the quality and the size.
All right, what's the most common size lens, do we know?
It depends on...
Mine is 77. I have 2 or 3 lenses of that size.
They're 77. That's a common size for Canon L glass.
Okay.
Okay.
So what?
For Nikon, I think 82 is a common size and 67 is a common size.
Okay, so what would a price range for a CPL be on that?
100 or better.
Or better to what, like 2 million?
No, 100 to 150 for a circular polarizer. I think that would get you all the way up to the B plus W top of the line. The Marumis come in maybe 120 or 100.
So one filter is $100 to $150.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I think if you get some of the other brands, you might get down into the $80 bracket. But I'd be surprised you can find a quality one in those sizes for less than that.
And what about neutral density? Like
neutral density are going to be half that.
Okay, so the circular polarizers lenses are more expensive.
Yeah, because you figure it's 2 pieces of glass instead of 1.
Ah.
Plus a ring that revolves, so it's a more complicated thing. So a circular polarizer is generally always going to be twice as expensive as a neutral density filter, just as a ballpark figure.
Okay. All right.
So
anything else you want to add about filters?
Well, yeah, as I said, I keep that CPL when I'm doing landscapes. It's on there almost all the time, and I'll take it off occasionally. With a circular filter, taking it off sometimes can be a challenge, because if you put it on too tight, and they're metal, and your lens is metal and plastic and everything else, and they expand and contract at different rates, and you find out that although you didn't put it on there very tight, you can't get it off. And you try and you try. And the problem is, the harder you try, the less likely you are to get it off, because you're squeezing the sides of the filter when you're grabbing it. So you're turning it from a circle into an oval.
Okay.
So you've just defeated your purpose, so you can't get it off. So they have what they call filter wrenches or filter rings, and they're just two thin pieces of metal that go around the filter that you can squeeze it and actually put pressure on it all the way around, and then sometimes you can have a filter you've struggled along, and you get the 2 little wrenches and you just and they go off. We're talking $10 for them. The other way you can take it off sometime is these gripper mats they make for taking off lids. Those, you just lay one of them flat, put the lens down on it with the filter touching that, and just apply pressure and turn.
Okay.
That's not going to work with a circular polarizer, though, because the front of the circular polarizer turns itself.
My what is it called? Lens grip? Lens wrench?
Filter wrench.
Filter wrench. My filter wrenches are plastic.
Yeah, that's
They're
what mine are. Yeah.
Hard plastic, and And you're right, they were like $10 or something, and I love them because my hands are just not strong. And
well, like I said, it doesn't
I keep them here because
the strength doesn't matter, because when you're squeezing, you're making it out around and making it harder to take off.
Yeah, but I keep them here because we have customers who come in here all the time and they can't get the filter off or whatever, so I keep them there. So that's really good advice, and we can put a link to some of those in the show notes.
Yeah, $10, and you have them there, and I usually try and keep them in my bag, so if I need it, I have it, you know. And
now, one of the things that I have noticed is, you know, I do a lot of shopping at Amazon, and Amazon doesn't carry the brand name filters in general. They do carry those wrenches, though.
Well,
B&H, they have some.
Amazon has,
but they don't have a lot of them.
No, they have some of the Marumis I was talking about.
And B&H is limited too. I mean, a lot of these filter companies, you have to go directly to the company.
Yeah, especially the high-end ones are, you know, small companies, and they're selling direct.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind when you're looking for filters. You can't just go to B&H and get the range that you might want.
Yeah, you may have to go directly to the filter company. For one of my filters, I had to order it from Japan and wait forever for it to come. That was for my little Panasonic LX100, and apparently nobody buys a CPL in a size that small. I can't remember what it was, but it was
tiny,
and they just don't have them anywhere, you know. So
yeah, because that's kind of like a bridge point and shoot camera almost.
Yeah, so I had to wait, I guess, a couple months for it to actually be shipped in, because I called all over. I couldn't find anybody who had one.
Yeah, you are a CPL kind of guy. I've gotten so much better since I met you. So where can our audience find you, Joe?
JoeFitzpatrickPhoto.com, and of course on our Understand Photography site. They link to each other. You'll see most of my photos on the Joe Fitzpatrick photo site, as well as photos we've taken on our various workshops to the Everglades, Forgotten Coast, St. Augustine, Cuba, and what have you.
And you are also, I guess, self-inflicted, maybe is the word, but you pretty much are our lead on the Understand Photography Facebook group as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you go to facebook.com/Understand Photography, you can click on groups and get to the group. But the direct link is Facebook.com/groups/Understand Photography. I'm sorry, I said Facebook.com is where you need to go.
And we've been having fun on there
And you've
lately.
been doing a really nice job on that, because you do.
Yeah, we have fun with that. I started something called Monochrome Monday. So every Monday I encourage people to put up a black and white photo or separate or whatever they want up there. And on Wednesday we have a Whatever Wednesday and a Wildlife Wednesday. First it was Wildlife Wednesday, and I said, you know, we're shutting out some of the other people, so they're both. So you have Wildlife Wednesday and you have Whatever Wednesday. So Wednesday we encourage you to post at least one picture or something like that. Of course, you can post it at any time, but it's fun. You get a bunch of people posting pictures on those days, and then we comment and what have you. And it's fun. It's fun to do.
It is fun. People seem to really enjoy it. And also in that group, you can get critiques if you want. You can ask questions like, hey, I saw your show on filters, and I'm thinking about buying a Hoya 12345 or whatever.
Yeah,
what do you think of
this?
this?
We're on there and we monitor it. You monitor it, I monitor it. There's a lot of other people on there, so you can usually get some pretty good advice on there. And on there, you know where the advice is coming from. Not like you go on a lot of these forums, and everybody on the forum is an expert. And I put quotes on that expert. You know, so at least here you know where the advice is coming from.
All right, JoeFitzpatrickPhoto.com or UnderstandPhotography.com. Thank you for being on the show again.
My pleasure, Peggy.
And to the audience, if you would do us a big favor and leave us a review on iTunes, that helps us come up in the search engines, and we really, really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions for topics or guests, just email me at Peggy@UnderstandPhotography.com. Peggy Farron, thank you so much for joining us on the Understand Photography Show. We will see you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, either on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, or as a podcast.